In this video, we'll explore the remarkable ways some Amish communities do just that. From traditional salting to slow smoking, these methods go far beyond mere survival tactics. They're a window into a lifestyle that values resourcefulness, faith, and family unity. We'll see how a focus on community collaboration and time-tested know-how can replace modern technology, all while keeping food safe and flavorful. Get ready to discover just how creative and efficient these off-grid techniques can be and why they might hold insights for all of us. Whether we're looking for more sustainable solutions or just curious about a totally different approach to everyday life. Number 1, the values that shape their approach. Amish communities follow a distinct way of life that places a heavy emphasis on self-reliance, modesty, and faith-driven traditions. These values affect everything from how they dress to how they grow, prepare, and store their food. Choosing not to rely on modern refrigerators stems from a bigger picture. They believe electric appliances can create an atmosphere of convenience that drifts away from the family-centered routines they cherish. By sidestepping typical household technologies, they stay closer to simpler methods passed down through many generations. This deep-rooted preference isn't about ignoring progress, but rather maintaining a certain harmony, one that keeps them aware of each step required to put food on the table. Instead of tossing meat into a high-tech freezer, they handle it through detailed methods like salting, curing, smoking, and canning. Doing things by hand, in their view, cultivates patience and a more grounded relationship to their daily sustenance. Many Amish feel modern convenience has a way of creeping into family dynamics and fraying the bonds that hold everyone together. For instance, when everything is automated, there's less need for cooperation across different age groups. In their communities, butchering meat and preserving it becomes a family-wide event, bringing siblings, parents, uncles, aunts, and neighbors all under one roof. Adults might do the heavier lifting or manage the precise salting, while teenagers help with handling utensils and younger ones rinse jars or gather spices. The entire process becomes an opportunity to reinforce communal ties. Without a fridge, there's also a sense of urgency that ensures people come together to work through the steps. Whether that means splitting tasks over one long day or spreading them out across a week of careful preparation. Some Amish groups do permit slight accommodations, like using propane-powered coolers in specific instances. But even then, strict rules keep these exceptions from unraveling the overall goal, staying connected to tradition and limiting reliance on outside systems. Their guiding principle is to remain mindful about every new piece of technology introduced into daily life. This mindfulness extends to meat storage, where they rely on a blend of time-tested methods, close-knit teamwork, and careful observation of environmental conditions. If they sense a warmer season might pose issues, they adjust the timing of their butcher days or add extra steps such as deeper salting or longer smoke. That level of attentiveness might seem old-fashioned to outsiders, but it preserves not only their food supply, it also reinforces the values that define who they are as a community. Number 2, methods that keep meat edible for years. When people learn that Amish communities can keep meat safe for incredibly long periods without refrigeration, they're often astonished. But these techniques aren't just random guesses. They've been refined through hands-on experiments, communal learning, and faith in certain bedrock principles. Salting is a major approach, coating or packing the meat in salt to lower moisture levels and make it less friendly to bacteria. Families might set up wide wooden tubs or barrels where they layer cuts of pork, beef, or game between generous pours of salt. Some might enhance the salt with sugar, black pepper, or unique spice combinations that add flavor while also warding off unwanted microbes. The cured cuts are then left to rest in cool spaces for predetermined amounts of time, monitored closely to prevent mishaps like mold or spoilage from excess humidity. Smoking is another crucial method they rely on. Many Amish homesteads feature small, purpose-built smokehouses crafted from wood or brick. These humble structures often contain hooks attached to the ceiling, from which various meat cuts dangle. Below, a carefully maintained fire, fed by applewood, hickory, or other aromatic woods, envelops the meats in fragrant smoke. Over several days or even weeks, the slow exposure to smoke infuses them with distinctive flavors and helps form a protective crust. Besides lending a delicious taste, the smoke's chemical compounds act as natural barriers to bacterial growth, letting these cuts remain shelf-stable for extended periods. Even the thickness of the cut matters. Thicker pieces may need a longer smoke to ensure they're treated evenly, while thinner slices can achieve a solid cure in less time. Canning rounds out the trio of main techniques. Using pressure canners heated by propane stoves or wood-fired cooktops, families place cooked meat into sturdy mason jars, then seal them under the correct pressure and temperature. As the jars cool, a vacuum forms inside, blocking new bacteria from entering. This method can keep contents edible for a considerable length of time. Rows of jars might contain anything from chicken and beef chunks to flavorful stews and soups. Generally, canning is timed to sync with large-scale butchering days, so families can process a big haul in one go. Because the entire operation is so elaborate, it's not unusual for neighboring households to share resources, like large canners or extra jars, so everything gets done smoothly. These interlocking techniques create a safety net. If one method isn't ideal for a particular cut of meat, another method usually picks up the slack. Number 3. Cultivating know-how. From generation to generation, the real power behind these preservation techniques comes from how thoroughly they're embedded in Amish daily life. Rather than reading an official manual, children gain an understanding of the process by helping out at every stage. An older sister may guide a younger sibling through a simple job, such as washing glass jars, but in the process, the younger child picks up random bits of knowledge, like how to spot if a jar is chipped or if a lid is on too tightly. Grandparents might oversee the process of salting, demonstrating the correct ratio of salt to meat and explaining why each cut needs a different level of care. Over time, all these pieces of advice stick, so by the time young adults are ready to start families of their own, they have an internal library of tips and tricks. This immersion approach means there's less reliance on guesswork. By the time an adolescent is old enough to handle a sizable knife or manage a smokehouse fire, they've already had multiple years of simply being around these tasks. They've seen the caution that older adults exercise when examining brined cuts for potential issues. They've heard cautionary tales from neighbors who once lost an entire barrel of meat because they didn't use enough salt or let the brine temperature get too warm. Such stories, passed around during communal meals or gatherings, act as mini lessons. They reinforce why it's crucial to pay attention to details like whether the smokehouse door is cracked open just enough for airflow, or whether the meat is hung at an ideal distance from the heat source. Unlike mainstream society, where food preservation techniques might be a niche hobby, the Amish treat these skills as a fundamental necessity for day-to-day survival. This emphasis shapes not only their relationship with food, but also their broader outlook on resourcefulness. By training every member in the community, men, women, and children, to contribute, they build a collective memory that can adapt over time. Should the climate change or supply lines shift, they're better equipped to tweak brine recipes or modify smokehouse designs. Their knowledge base is never static. It evolves as new lessons come to light, all while respecting the core principle that working together and sticking to simpler methods is the surest path to reliable sustenance. Number 4, special setups and communal butchering days. One of the most fascinating aspects of how they preserve meat is the collaborative nature of butchering. Though each family usually raises its own livestock, pigs, cattle, chickens, or sometimes even turkeys, there are times when several households band together to process them. Large gatherings form on butcher days, complete with a blend of practical work and socializing. Men might handle the actual slaughter and initial breakdown of the animal, while women take charge of sorting the cuts, cleaning them, and getting them ready for salting or canning. Younger folks shuttle tools around, gather the necessary ingredients, or watch over smaller siblings. Despite the seriousness of the work, you'll often hear an undercurrent of laughter or casual conversation. This communal system offers numerous perks. Splitting tasks means that large-scale projects become less overwhelming and more efficient. If a neighbor has an especially roomy smokehouse, another family might bring their ham cuts there to benefit from the perfect setup. Similarly, if someone's supply of coarse salt is low, it's not uncommon to see them borrowing a few bags from a friend. The reciprocal nature of such exchanges cements bonds across the community. People know they can count on others for help, especially in critical times like the arrival of a sudden heat wave that could jeopardize recently butchered meat. Beyond the immediate practicality, these gatherings carry a deeper cultural weight. They reinforce the tradition of manual labor being a communal duty. There's a sense of pride in seeing large barrels lined up, each containing carefully salted sections of pork or beef, or in hearing the steady crackle of a smoking fire that's been maintained through everyone's combined efforts. By the time they wrap up a full day of cutting, curing, or sealing jars, participants have not only accomplished a massive undertaking, they've also strengthened the very social fabric that keeps their community alive. Number 5, adapting to change while holding on to the past. Although the Amish are known for their consistent traditions, that doesn't mean they're entirely closed off to new ideas. Over the years, some groups have tested slight modifications that might help them handle the meat preservation process more effectively. For instance, a few districts have allowed the use of solar-powered thermometers to gauge the temperature in a root cellar or smokehouse, believing it doesn't fundamentally disrupt their way of life to gather data in a low-tech manner. Others might invest in bulk orders of specific salt varieties that came on the market recently, noticing that these salts might include certain minerals beneficial for curing. However, every step is evaluated carefully by the local leadership to make sure it doesn't spiral into a steady drift toward modern dependency. Additionally, temperature shifts and seasonal changes have pushed some families to reconsider the timing of butchering. If the climate in a region warms significantly over a few years, they might shift their schedule to earlier in the fall or later in the winter, ensuring they can cure and smoke meat in naturally cooler weather. Some might adopt alternative materials for constructing or insulating smokehouses, like using thicker walls or extra layers of straw to maintain a consistent internal environment. The underlying philosophy remains unwavering. Keep outside influences minimal, but don't be so rigid that they can't respond to practical environmental challenges. Even with these incremental adjustments, the Amish stay distinct from typical modern approaches. They remain uninterested in fully electric refrigerators or freezers, even if such devices would simplify their workload. As they see it, simplicity isn't just about ignoring technology, it's about making deliberate choices that resonate with their religious and ethical views. The crux is to preserve older customs, like salting pork in shared barrels, while leaving room to fine-tune details as families gain more insight about their local conditions. It's a stance that requires constant communication within each church district, as everyone weighs the pros and cons of every new method or tool. Number 6, eye-opening observations from outsiders. When non-Amish people visit these communities or watch documentaries, they're often taken aback by how well these methods work. Initially, some folks worry about food safety, assuming that without a fridge, everything must be teetering on the edge of spoilage. But after tasting a perfectly smoked sausage or a slice of salt-cured ham, many come away impressed by both the flavor and the longevity of the products. Some travelers have seen entire rooms filled with neatly hung cuts of meat, each labeled or mentally cataloged by the Amish family. They notice the cleanliness of the environment, the careful arrangement of spices, and the constant attention to humidity and temperature. Conversations with Amish community members reveal a level of expertise that goes far beyond just following a recipe. They talk confidently about how to spot the first signs of mold, the best thickness for a salt coating, or the exact shade a piece of meat should turn after a few weeks in the smokehouse. In many ways, it's a science, but one that's been handed down verbally and through direct practice, rather than gleaned from textbooks. Outsiders might ask, how do you know you won't get sick? The Amish often respond with a mix of experience-based reassurance and references to how they systematically check for spoilage. No piece of meat gets used unless it passes multiple sniff, touch, and sight tests. If anything feels off, they discard it instantly. Such visits also highlight an important reality. These communities have found a balance that allows them to produce high-quality food without leaning on what the rest of society might call essentials. In an age where almost everyone else can't imagine life without a fridge, the Amish quietly prove that alternative routes exist. Some guests end up trying a few of these preservation tips at home, canning tomatoes or making jerky, and find the methods surprisingly accessible. Although replicating the scale and consistency of the Amish approach isn't easy for the average person, it opens up a dialogue. Maybe we can all learn something from their meticulous, community-driven strategies. Number 7. Embracing a different kind of security. The phrase food security typically implies having stocked up groceries or reliable appliances. Yet for the Amish, security arises from the knowledge and skills that ensure they can preserve meat under almost any condition. This creates a sense of independence from fluctuating energy costs, supply chain hiccups, or power outages. If a storm knocks out electricity for days, many modern households rush to salvage whatever is in their freezers, whereas Amish families simply continue with their regular routine. Their meats remain stable in salt, smoke, or jars. This resilience extends to the rest of their lifestyle, where they learn to handle challenges with teamwork rather than quick one-person fixes. An underappreciated aspect of this security is how it nurtures resourcefulness. When you're obligated to plan an entire year's worth of meat storage, you become skilled at anticipating shifts in the weather or preparing for potential surpluses and shortages. If a particularly harsh winter is expected, families might increase the amount of smoked meat they produce and reduce the portion that goes into canning, or vice versa, depending on what they find easier to store or transport. Because they don't rely on a continuous power supply, they remain relatively unaffected by spikes in energy prices. That money can be diverted into better farming equipment, or materials that help them expand their root cellars or fix their smokehouses. Beyond the practical angle, this approach fosters a peaceful mindset tied to the seasons and land. Knowing exactly where your food comes from, who helped process it, and how it was stored can be deeply reassuring. In a modern world where people often feel disconnected from the production of what they eat, the Amish demonstrate how daily tasks, like preserving meat, can actually become an anchor that ties individuals to their community and environment. Instead of seeing it as burdensome labor, they view it as an opportunity to gather, learn, and ensure no one goes hungry, especially in tougher times. When neighbors gather in a barn to fill wooden barrels with cuts of pork or maintain a smokehouse fire late into the night, it's more than just a method of storage. It's a reminder that the most critical resource in these communities isn't a piece of machinery, but the collective commitment to sustaining one another. Over many decades, they've seen that strong faith, combined with consistent effort, can keep meat not only edible but genuinely tasty, far longer than many might believe possible. While outsiders might label these practices as unusual, within Amish circles, they are simply second nature, a blueprint for living that prioritizes practical wisdom, collaboration, and a deliberate pace of life.